You're watching Extras from the Extension on Eagle Community Television. This show is brought to you by Carico Implement.
Hello, I'm Stacy Campbell with K-State Research and Extension of Ellis County. And well, spring is coming upon us, and as that nears, it might be time for some farmers to take some soil samples for their summer crops, such as their milo and corn. March is a good time of year to do that. If you didn't do it back in the fall, March is a great time to take soil samples. A couple of things that I would suggest is whatever time of year that you do take your sample for each crop, you try to do that consistently the same time each year. In other words, for wheat, you may be taking a sample in about August or early September before planting. That's a good time. And for summer crops, you can take that after harvest in the fall or in early spring here in March. Of course, there are several ways you can take soil samples. You may have something mounted onto your four-wheeler, more mechanical to take soil samples, or even in a vehicle, but oftentimes a lot of farmers are using a soil sample probe, such as something like this, or they're even starting to use cordless drills and putting an auger onto an extension, and in the bucket there is there's like a PVC piece of pipe sticking up there that helps bring that sample up out of the soil into the bucket. And there's several ways to take samples. Oklahoma State, interestingly, has on their website, or you can actually just Google OSU soil sampling auger, and you'll get the designs on how to build something like this to where you can attach it to your cordless auger. They list all the parts that you'll need to go buy that you can get at the hardware store. And I think you can even buy them from Oklahoma State as well. As far as taking them by hand with this soil sampler here, of course you need your soil sampler or your soil sample probe. You'll need a clean bucket to put your samples into, and I didn't bring two buckets, but you're probably going to want two buckets, one for your shallow sample 0 to 6 inches, the other one for your profile sample 0 to 24 inches. And then something too important to have is something like WD-40 to spray into this tube that you're going to be collecting the soil in. That helps those cores come out of the tube much easier, and the WD-40 will not affect the sample will not affect the sample at all as far as the results. So talking quickly about soil sampling, you would want to divide your field up into either soil type, the topography, even maybe yield potential or past yields. And what I mean by that is we're out here in a relatively flat field, but if you have a field that has got more slope to it, maybe there's a hilltop and then there's side slopes and then a bottom ground, you would ideally want to take those samples on the hilltop as one separate sample, on the side slope as a separate sample, and on the bottom ground as completely different separate samples to send in, to give you an idea of how much nutrients you're going to need for each one of those areas in a field. Now in a field like this where it's pretty consistently flat, you could probably divide that field up into about 20, maybe 40 acre grids, if you will. Units. If it's a bigger field of 40 or 80 acres, or a bigger field of 80 to 100 acres, you may want to split that up in half by 40, 50 acres and do the sampling that way. Another thing to discuss is the amount of samples to take. K-State and other universities have done some work, and really to get good reliable samples you need to take about a minimum of 15 cores per field. Okay, that is quite a few, but that will increase the reliability of that sample. And then on sampling, I'd mentioned 0 to 6. 0 to 6 inch sample, you're going to be sampling for phosphorus, zinc, your organic matter, and pH. That would be one separate sample that you would have in one bucket. And then the other sample that we recommend, which is harder to get, is the 0 to 24 inch, your profile sample. That's for your nitrogen, sulfur, and chloride. Nitrogen, sulfur, and chloride, all those samples are mobile, they move with the water, so in order to really get some accurate results, you need to go down deeper into the soil, preferably 24 inches if you can. Realizing it's hard to get down to 24 inches all the time, whatever the average depth you were able to get down to taking your profile sample, you need to indicate that on your form when you send it in, that you were sampled down to, say, an average depth of 18 or 20 inches. Make sure you indicate that. Of course, the more information you can put on those soil sample forms that you're sending to the lab, the better. Obviously, you're going to put what crop it is you're going to be growing, your yield intention, you'll put the prior crop that you grew, whether it's dry land or irrigated, and then you'll indicate, you know, what test you're wanting for that particular sample, and all that will generally be on those soil sample forms. Another thing on phosphorus, I know the K-State lab has it down at the bottom. You can check whether you're going to sample, whether you're wanting to build your phosphorus up or you're just sampling for sufficiency. If you're wanting to build phosphorus, that means over about a 3 to 5 year period, you're actually going to put on extra phosphorus and build it up into the soil, because phosphorus doesn't move much at all in the soil. It's not mobile, and you can do that. Or if you just want to check sufficiency to where you just need enough phosphorus for that crop. Either way, you can do that. Another thing I get to talk about too on taking samples, I guess I did already mention it, maybe in summary I should say, that be sure that you're consistent on the time of year that you're sampling for each crop. Like I say, for wheat, probably best before planting in August or early September. Summer crops, you can take soil samples after harvest in November, or if you didn't get that done, March is also a good time as well. But the important thing is to try to take soil samples. You don't have to do it every year for every field, but maybe try to get on some type of rotation where every 2 or 3 years you're taking samples for those fields. However, ideally, considering the cost of what fertilizer is, it doesn't seem to fluctuate a whole lot in price anymore. In other words, it doesn't seem to go down in price much, even though natural gas decreases in price. So a very important input, but profit margins are tight, so you may want to start looking at soil sampling more often to try to limit your amount of inputs. And that's another thing just to mention is K-State has done a number of surveys of soil sampling and so forth through the years, and they found out that actually nitrogen, there's usually more residual nitrogen in fields than what most farmers realize. So that's another good reason to go ahead and be taking soil samples. You may not need as much nitrogen or phosphorus as you think, but there's only one way to know, and that's by taking a soil sample. Well, this has been Stacy Campbell with K-State Research and Extension of Ellis County with Eagle Community Television.
You're watching extras from the Extension on Eagle Community Television. This show is brought to you by Carico Implement.
Spring is here, and that means it's time to come out and visit Carico Implement in Hays, Kansas for all your lawn care needs. We stock and sell the full line of John Deere riding lawn equipment, along with Honda walk-behind mowers and generators. We also offer the full lineup of steel power products. If your project requires even more muscle, check out our full lineup of John Deere compact tractors and skid loaders. And don't forget, we have the parts and services to keep you up and running all spring long. So whatever your spring lawn care and maintenance needs are, come on out to Carico Implement for a solution that fits.